मेरे पास गाड़ी है, बंगला है, स्टार्टअप्स है, स्टार्टअप में इन्वेस्टमेंट है, मेरे पास माँ भी है।
लेकिन बाबा, हमारे पास सब्सक्राइबर्स नहीं है।
हे हाय फ्रेंड्स, दिस इज आनंद एंड वेलकम टू माय चैनल। तो पहली चीज़, मैंने ये चैनल क्यों बनाया है इसके बारे में पहले बात करता हूँ। तो as you all know, right, like startups are growing in India. I mean, all over the world, startups are growing, and you would see every nook and corner you'll find like very interesting startups. Startups के बारे में information देने वाले लोग भी बहुत बढ़ गए. I mean, channels बढ़ गए, newsletters बढ़ गए. I mean, I've seen like a lot of YouTube channels as well, जहाँ पे सिर्फ startups के बारे में बात की जाती है. तो what has happened now is there is a huge, like, I mean, there are people who are really willing to participate in this startup ecosystem. But one thing that has happened is nobody is talking about the mindset that is required, right? Like to get into this startup ecosystem. वहाँ पे रिस्क क्या होती है, वहाँ पे चीज़ें कैसे होती है, सब दिखता है वैसे नहीं रहता. और मैं पिछले 10 सालों से तकरीबन 7 अभी तक स्टार्टअप्स मैंने निकाली है और आई हैव इन्वेस्टेड इन ओवर डजन्स ऑफ स्टार्टअप्स. तो मैं आपको वो सारी चीज़ें बताने वाला हूँ जो मुझे स्टार्टअप्स के बारे में पता है, एंड थिंग्स दैट यू माइट वांट टू रेफर और यूज व्हेन यू आर आइदर एंगेजिंग इन एनी कैपेसिटी इन द स्टार्टअप. सो आई एम अज्यूमिंग दैट यू माइट बी समवन हु इज विलिंग टू स्टार्ट योर ओन कंपनी, और यू आर वर्किंग, यू वांट टू ज्वाइन एनी इंटरेस्टिंग स्टार्टअप. वहाँ पे कैसे ज्वाइन हो सकते हैं. You are already working in the startup and you want to see how other successful startups are working, and the way I have been learning, I mean, I would like to share some of the key learnings from the successful startups as well. Now, there would be people, right, like who would be interested in investing in the startups, right? Many times you cannot participate or you cannot join the startups because you already have some very interesting job that you are currently working on, but you can participate in the startups by investing in the startups or giving advisory to them. तो मैं वो सारी चीज़ें आपको बताऊंगा जिससे आपको पता चलेगा कि स्टार्टअप्स में ज्वाइन होने के लिए और या ये इकोसिस्टम में राइट माइंडसेट हम कैसे ला सकते हैं और इससे हम ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा चीज़ें कैसे पा सकते हैं. तो मैं आपको वो सारी चीज़ें बताऊंगा, लेकिन वो जाने से पहले मैं तुम्हें एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग किस्सा बताता हूँ. Last week I went to Girnar Parvat and it's in Junagadh, Gujarat, and I went with my wife and there was also a group. So we climbed the mountain. There are almost 10,000 steps to reach to Sri Gurudat Maharaj's temple. We went there. It took a couple of hours, right, like for us to reach there, then to come back, and we're pretty much tired, and like but we had a fantastic experience. So what happened, in the evening when I was walking in the garden, I fell down, and there was Madhavi Tai, right, like, I mean, she came and we started talking, and she used one very interesting saying which is in Marathi, but it's very interesting. She said that Himalaya chadla पण मोरीत पडला. So what does that mean, right? I mean, literally this means that I was able to climb the mountain Himalaya, but I fell down in the washroom. So how could we interpret these things or this saying, right? We are very good, or we are trained to do difficult things, but many times we ignore very simple things, right? So we really need to keep ourselves, right, like, I mean, having awareness about the things is very important, and that's what, right, like, we are planning to do through this channel. And I will be talking to a lot of interesting startups. I'll be talking to some of the hidden gems as well. So I have I mean, since I've connected to so many startups, I would like to bring them over here. I'll talk about them, or I'll bring the CEOs of those startups. I'll ask them to talk about their startups where you can participate in any capacity, right? Like, you can either invest in those startups, join, like, do mentoring, like, introduce them. So I mean, we really want to create like an ecosystem which can help not only them but also to grow the overall ecosystem and help you participate in that ecosystem as well. So there I've seen, right, like, I mean, there is no one formula to like invest in the right startup, right? Like, I mean, there are no certain, I mean, parameters, right, like, which you could use to figure out like which startup is going to be successful. But there are certain areas that you can look into to increase the probability, right, like, of startup success की probability यहाँ से बढ़ सकती है. आपको जैसे पता है startups are risky, right? Like, I mean, please, I mean, if you don't know, I mean, try to read. There is a lot of books, material, that is available, and I'll also explain, right? Like, I mean, now sub startups, like not all startups can give, 10x, 20x returns, right? And I have, I've seen so many startups, right? Like really great startups, great founders. I've seen that they have been struggling as well. So you have to look into this part, that invest in the startups where, you think you understand that domain, you can help that startup in some meaningful way, and try to understand how they're doing. I mean, try to be actively involved, right, like in those startups. So ensure that you understand this part as well. So तो मैंने कैसे देखा है कि what I've seen that out of a lot of factors, there are few factors that are very common, right, like in the startups, and it also depends on what type of startup you have. I mean, if it is a deep tech, then you have to have different set of personalities, but some of the very common things that I've seen in the startups are the startup team is super passionate, right? The team has to be, and team कौन से लोगों से बनती है? Team फाउंडिंग मेंबर्स रहते हैं, सीनियर मेंबर्स रहते हैं, एंड ट्राई टू चेक, राइट, लाइक हाउ दे आर कैरिंग द स्टार्टअप, हाउ प्राउड आर दे, राइट, लाइक आई मीन टेकिंग द नेम ऑफ दैट स्टार्टअप. तो मैंने ये देखा है कि कोई भी टीम, राइट, लाइक उनमें 3 चीज़ें तो होना बहुत जरूरी है. पहली चीज़, राइट, पहली चीज यानी इंटीग्रिटी. आई मीन, इज द स्टार्टअप ओनर्स और दिस फाउंडर्स और सीनियर टीम, do they have the integrity? I mean, do they have right character? Second very important thing, do they have the competency? What I mean by competency is, I mean, whatever they are working on, do they have experience? Are they willing to learn? Are they learning about that, right, like by reading books, right, like attending different seminars? Are they doing that? And third very important thing is energy. I mean, energy is definitely required, right? Like, I mean, you need, right, like, because you're like everything is against you, right? Like, I mean, you have to look for product market fit, you have to talk with the investors, you have to ensure that employees are happy. I mean, there are so many things that you have to look into. So you have to have like a super energy, and you also need to have that sense of urgency, right? Like, अगर ये आज नहीं हुआ तो बहुत देर हो सकती है. I mean, that sense of urgency is also required. So try to find whether the startup founders have, or founding team, or the senior team, they have, right, like these traits in them. So this is something very important. और मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि ये चीज़ अगर आप देखोगे अच्छी तरह से, तो you'll figure out, right, like, I mean, कौन सी स्टार्टअप अच्छी है, कहाँ पे आपको इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए. And what I have seen that there are many interesting startups that are going unnoticed. So if you come across any interesting startup, please do not hesitate to mention them, right, like in the comments, and I would be very happy to talk to them and try to see if we can cover them, right, like in any of our future episodes. आपको जैसे पता है कि कोई भी आदमी माँ के पेट से सब चीजें सीख के नहीं आता, वो धीरे धीरे शिद्दत से ये चीजें सीखता है. वैसे ही हम स्टार्टअप्स के बारे में हम छोटी छोटी चीजें सीखते जाएंगे. मुझे आशा है कि ये वीडियोस के जरिए मैं आपको अलग अलग इन्फॉर्मेशन दे सकूं, मैं भी आपसे सीख सकूं. हम एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म बनाएंगे जहां पे हम अच्छे स्टार्टअप्स को, अच्छी चीज़ों को और अच्छे माइंडसेट को हम लाएंगे, एंड वील क्रिएट लाइक अ बेटर वर्ल्ड फॉर टुमारो. थैंक यू.